Chapter 27, Crowned. I woke up at about 10 o'clock and noticed that most of the people who had slept over had gotten up and left. Cubano was also gone. I was now sober, and all at once the facts of the past 2 nights hit me like a ton of bricks. I was suddenly worried about going to jail for murder. I wondered if anybody had seen me shooting at the gangsters the night before. My nerves were jumpy, and I was even afraid to look out the window. All I could think about was being with my mother in Puerto Rico. Anything seemed better than what I feared my future would be like as a king. How could I be so stupid? There was no way I was going to join the Kings. Now, sober, I did not like the lifestyle that came with being a gang member. I heard a knock on the door and was scared to get up and open it. I just sat there and waited for one of the other guys to do it. I began imagining that the cops were on the other side of the door. I visualized the police charging in, slamming me to the floor and handcuffing me. To my relief, when the door was open, Cubana walked in. Cubana had cleaned up and changed clothes. She gave me some food she had picked up on the way over and joked and played around with me as I ate it. She had a happy-go-lucky personality. It was wonderful, but I really wasn't in the mood. Cubana noticed my seriousness and asked me what was wrong. I couldn't find the words. I had too many crazy thoughts in my mind to talk about anything. Cubana kept trying to cheer me up, but I was just too depressed. The vision of the police finding me, beating me up, and taking me to jail kept appearing over and over in my mind. I became angry with myself for not staying in Puerto Rico with my family. I wanted to take off running and never stop, but I was too scared to even move from where I was sitting. Cubana kept trying until I finally told her what was on my mind. I dug my face into her neck and whispered, "La Jada, they're going to get me." Cubana started laughing and was ready to blurt out my tears, but I held her real tight before she could. Please, don't say nothing," I whispered in her ear. She looked me straight in the eyes as I shed a tear. Cubana kissed me softly on the lips and said, "Perdóname, loquito. I'm sorry, little loco." Soon, the place began to fill up with kings. Yeah, I know. I messed that up, man. Today was the meeting when I would finally become a member. Again, joints were being passed around. At first, I turned them down, but eventually I started smoking also. I was hoping that with some weed in my head, the crazy thoughts would stop. It worked. I became relaxed. Now I was trying to figure out how to get myself out of my impending initiation. Before I came up with an answer for myself, the meeting started. All the queens excused themselves and left. They would have their own meeting at a separate location and then join ours later. All the kings stood up and bowed their heads as Pito said a prayer. The prayer Pito recited was known as the universal prayer of the Latin kings. It was mandatory for all kings to memorize it. Amor, Pito said when he finished the prayer. He then pounded his right fist upon his heart, brought it up, kissed it, and formed it into the king's sign as he held it up in the air. The king's hand sign consists of the index finger, little finger, and thumb held up while the other 2 fingers are folded. It is the same sign used to symbolize "I love you" in sign language. Everybody in the room did exactly as Pito had done. I wasn't allowed to. I was not a king yet. In fact, I wasn't even supposed to be there for the prayer. My actions the previous night earned me the right to be there. Also, Loco was completely sure that I would become a king that day, so he gave the okay for me to be there from the beginning of the meeting. After the prayer, my membership was announced. Any protest against me becoming a king had to be made at that time. Lalo spoke favorably of me. Pito and Loco did the same. I was hoping that someone would protest so that my initiation could be put off for another day, but that never happened. It was unanimous. I was welcomed into the gang. I stood there like an idiot with no desire to be a king, but no courage to say so. The one chance I had to prove that I was not a coward by speaking up and saying no passed me by. Because of my cowardice, I was about to be initiated into one of the biggest and most violent Latino gangs in Chicago. Pito led me into a separate room. The room was empty except for a couple of mattresses that were lying on the floor. We picked up the mattresses and stood them up against the wall. Bito left the room and returned with 3 other guys. He also had a stopwatch in his hand. The 3 guys he brought would have the honor of making me a king by beating me for 3 minutes. They were Pee-wee Latin kings who were all around my age. I was instructed to stand against the wall. The other 3 guys surrounded me. There was one on each side of me and one in front of me. I wanted to back out at the last minute, but I was so petrified of the consequences I would have to face if I did. Finally, I braced myself and told Bito I was ready. Bito gave the guys the go-ahead and they immediately began pounding on me. They hit me on my legs, arms, chest, and stomach. At first it hurt like hell, but after a while they got tired and their punches began to lose force. The guys had this expression on their faces, like they enjoyed what they were doing. After the 3 minutes had elapsed, Bito told them to stop. I was officially a Latin king. The guys who had done the initiation honors embraced me one at a time and said, "Amor, brother." I was glad the initiation was finally over. Now I had to be macho and hide my pain. I could hardly lift my arms because of the swelling in my shoulders. The muscle in one of my legs was so sore that I had to walk with a limp. We went back into the room where the meeting was taking place. I was greeted with applause, a lot of handshakes, and a hug from Loco. He announced that from that day on, I should be referred to as King Loco. I was given a notebook containing the laws and prayers of the Latin kings. It was exactly like the one Morena had shown me. I was then told which prayer I had to memorize by the next meeting. Failure to do so would result in disciplinary action. Lalo congratulated me and gave me a joint. It wasn't customary to get high while a meeting was taking place, but they were making an exception for me. I sat on a windowsill, lit up the joint, and watched as the meeting continued. That day, I became part of something, part of the in-crowd. I had proven my worth on the battlefield and through initiation. I had earned the right to wear the colors, hold up the hand sign, and be an ambassador of the Latin kings. With that honor came public labels. I was now officially a bum, junkie, drug user, dealer, criminal, thief, stupid, violent, good for nothing, two-timing snake in the grass. The Latin kings became my new family. They praised me for doing things I had gotten beaten for by my previous family. An almighty Latin king, that's what I was. I wore an imaginary crown coveted by many, and I had ruled an imaginary kingdom. I had no idea what I had got myself into. Maybe I didn't want to know. The weekly dues were collected. Every member had to donate $5 a week, which was used for the purchase of guns, large amounts of drugs, and bond money for members who got arrested. Surprisingly, some of the money was also used for members who were incarcerated for crimes they committed for the benefit of the gang. Many of these guys were actually doing time for the actions of others. After the money was collected, the treasurer, a guy called Chico, counted the money and announced that the total amount of money in the treasury was now $15,000. Lalo, who was the chief enforcer of the gang, made a request for money to be used for the purchase of guns that were being offered to the gang by a member of the Southside Latin Kings. According to Lalo, the guns were being brought over from out of state and were brand new. They included 357 Magnums, 9mm automatics, automatic rifles with eye scopes, and riot or pump shotguns. Ammunition for all the weapons was also being supplied. Lalo was asking for approval to use $5,000 to make that purchase. Bito was the vice president, second in command under Loco. He asked for approval of another $5,000 for the purchase of 20 pounds of marijuana. He explained that the marijuana be sold in ounces, half ounces, and nickel bags. He thought the money used for the purchase could easily be doubled. Loco then took over the meeting. He started by announcing that the total sum of money given by Chico did not include the cocaine and heroin profits that had not been collected. He estimated that the profits be between $15,000 and $20,000. As he talked, I began to realize that there was more to being a Latin king than just standing on the corner representing. Lalo continued explaining that any members who wanted to make some money could sell drugs. Those that wanted to do this had to understand that they were responsible for all the drugs they were given and all the money they collected. The only excuse that would be accepted for lost profits was getting busted by the cops, and this had to be proven. He reminded us of the king's law against using that drug. He told us that anyone using heroin and calling himself a king should be beaten without question. He also warned us that most of these guys were pretty crazy and wouldn't care about killing one of us for their drug. Great, I thought. Not only am I in danger of being killed by rival gang members, I also have to watch out for some of my own. The subject returned to the money needed for the purchase of guns and drugs. Everybody was to vote by raising their left hand above their head, showing the king's hand sign. The vote was unanimous. The guns and drugs would be purchased, and an extra pound of marijuana would be bought for the personal use of the Latin kings. With those issues settled, it was time to move on to other business. I gave my undivided attention to everything that was said. I never knew how highly organized gang life was and how much it was run like a legitimate business. Until then, I had thought being a gang member was all about partying, getting high, and fighting with other gangs. This new knowledge of gang life intrigued me, but also left me with an eerie feeling. The next item on the agenda was to hear charges that were being brought up against 4 members. 3 of them were being charged with rape, and 1 king was being charged with stealing money from the gang. Everybody was asked to leave the room except for those who formed the committee: Loco, Pito, Lalo, Diego, Paco, and Gordo, who would decide their guilt or innocence. Loco asked me to stay and serve as some kind of usher so that I could see for myself the seriousness of violating the laws of the kings. The committee decided to hear the members accused of stealing first. I was instructed to walk the 3 guys charged with rape to the door. They were to wait outside until it was their turn to be tried. The guy charged with stealing, Slim, was a skimpy kid who couldn't have been more than 13 years old. He looked pale and nervous, and it seemed like he was ready to cry. Slim had been given 15 quarter bags of cocaine to sell. He was to keep $75 out of the $100, and $75 he was responsible for, but none of the money ever showed up. Lalo asked Slim about the whereabouts of the money. Slim replied that a junkie stuck him up. When asked if he recognized the guy, Slim said no. Lalo asked him if he used cocaine. Slim answered no. He was then reminded of the fact that he was responsible for the money. Slim said that he was aware of that, but it wasn't his fault that he got stuck up. Diego asked him if he was sure he didn't have a cocaine habit. Slim said he was sure. Diego accused him of snorting the cocaine with a local prostitute who sold her body for the purpose of supporting her coke habit. Diego explained that for a dime of coke, the prostitute had told him what had happened